He's the man that started it all. In most people's minds, the greatest James Bond of all time. Sean Connery completely reinvented spy movies and action movies with this incredible character that is still around today. Hi everyone, I'm Jim and welcome back to My Movie Obsession, a place of film obsessors. My channel focuses primarily on talking about retro movies from the 80s and 90s, as well as movies like the James Bond films, and of course superhero movies. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing and we can discuss our movie obsession. So is Sean Connery the greatest James Bond? You know, I always go back and forth. I always try and kind of go through the pluses and negatives. I like every James Bond actor, but it just might be Sean Connery, you know. He just has that extra spark that some of the actors don't have. He's just so iconic. It might be to do with that he's the first. It might be that, but he just steps on the screen and he instantly, you believe him in the role. He instantly hooks you. I mean, the first movie he did, Dr. No, was the very first movie, and he doesn't even have to grow into the role. He just is James Bond. So yeah, let's start off with my ranking of Sean Connery's films, and they might surprise you, some of the, placings. If you have a different list, let me know in the comments down below, and don't have a go at me, don't hate me if I don't rate some of his movies the way that you do. I've got a very unique list when it comes to Sean Connery, so let's get right into it. So the last place on the list is Never Say Never Again, which was actually of course an unofficial James Bond movie that came out long after Sean Connery departed the role. And of course Roger Moore was still going. Simultaneously, they made Never Say Never Again to compete with Octopussy, which was in the official series. Never Say Never Again was an unofficial James Bond movie, and it bloody shows. This movie just feels unofficial. It feels cluttered and not finished and awkward and a bit frustrating to watch and annoying. Every character in the film rubs me the wrong way. It's like they're trying to create a James Bond series with everyone is inferior. Like, the only person who would be up to scratch is Sean Connery as James Bond, and even then he does seem a little bored in the role. He was still Sean Connery, he still put in a good performance, but he was just, the spark had gone. You know, he'd been away from the part for far too long to come back, in my opinion. And yes, he looked older, but that's not one of my major issues. I mean, Roger Moore looked old as a sod, and I still like him in the films. It wasn't that he looked old, it was the fact that his energy, his passion had gone, whereas with Roger Moore you could see it was still there. So Sean Connery, he'd aged, but he'd lost the enthusiasm, he'd lost that unique vibe that he had as James Bond. There's some really weird characters in this. There's this lady who's a villain, and she gets really annoyed at Bond because he won't say that she was the best he ever slept with. She's a bloody villain. What do you care what this old sod thinks about whether you were good in bed or not? Constant women swooning over him, which worked in the 60s films, but times had moved on and you were still kind of having this women liked him no matter what sort of thing, which isn't really, as the James Bond films went on, that got less and less, and it had got less and less in the official series, but they were still trying to deliver that 60s kind of attitude in Never Say Never Again, which probably wasn't a good thing. It felt out of place and awkward. But it's actually a remake of Thunderball, which is probably a good one to remake, because Thunderball I think is a bit of a flawed one, but I actually think the original Thunderball is better. It just doesn't seem iconic. It doesn't seem like it's got much behind it. It seems like they threw it out there to give Sean Connery one more roll of the dice to compete against Roger Moore. It doesn't seem like they were genuinely trying to achieve anything with this movie. The next one, I'm going to be crucified. You were going to kill me, you were going to lynch me, you were going to come at me like the villagers in Frankenstein and burn the place down. This one is You Only Live Twice. I know it's an iconic James Bond film. Everyone loves it. Everyone views it as one of the greatest James Bond films of all time. I just don't get it, guys. I don't get it. Most of this film is James Bond pissing around in Japan. He literally goes there, and I don't know what he's doing. I genuinely don't know the plot of this film. To this day, I don't know the plot of You Only Live Twice. It's so boring, guys. It's so boring, and I try and like it every time I watch it, because it's the one with Blofeld in. It's the one with Donald Pleasence in his iconic role as one of James Bond's lead villains, Blofeld, with the white cap, the villain Dr. Evil spoofed. And it's great to see Donald Pleasence. That ending kind of combination in Donald Pleasence's lair is brilliant, but everything before that is James Bond going to Japan and pissing about with a bunch of geisha girls. It's iconic, and it kind of has a lot of James Bond elements to it. There's loads of James Bond elements that you've seen parodied in Austin Powers and Johnny English and films like that. So it's iconic, and it's very well photographed. Japan looks great, the soundtrack's awesome, everything looks grand and brilliant, but just nothing happens. I know there's also another reason why this movie is memorable, is they have Little Nelly in it. Little Nelly is awesome. Little Nelly is one of the greatest James Bond gadgets of all time, which is basically a little helicopter that he constructs, and that scene is fantastic where James Bond flies Little Nelly. So there's iconic moments in You Only Live Twice, but overall, I feel like I only vibe with this film for about 10 minutes. It's just not great in my opinion. I apologise, guys. I know people love You Only Live Twice. It doesn't gel with me. Maybe it will in the future, but I've tried it so many times. It just never gets me fired up. Never really, I'm always drained by the end. So next up on the list is Thunderball. Now Thunderball is a decent James Bond film. It's not the best, it's entertaining enough and it's iconic enough, and I like a lot of the shots in this film. I like the underwater storyline. It was a departure from Goldfinger, went entirely in another direction, to having James Bond around on beaches and going underwater and trying to sneak in underwater bases and things like that. So it was different. The entire tone was different, and I respect that because it was entirely a new kind of energy and a new refreshing vibe on things after Goldfinger. It seems very individual of a movie. Sean Connery is great in the role. He has some really, really good moments with the bongo in the film Domino, but the villain of the film is very, very unmemorable, and some of the underwater scenes can be pretty boring, but it's photographed brilliantly, it looks great, some of the action scenes are good. It's kind of a mismatch of good and bad Thunderball. Coming after Goldfinger, it's a real step down, in my opinion. It's a massive step down. This doesn't have a lot of the elements that Goldfinger did. It introduced all these new elements, and it kind of tried to be a little more grounded, a little more gritty, and the fun was kind of gone from Goldfinger. So the new vibes work on some level, but in some areas you're sitting there longing back for a Goldfinger. It's got some of Sean Connery James Bond's most shady moments, like when he blackmails a girl at a health spa into sex because he's just been attempted to be murdered by a gangster, and he says, "I'll tell your boss unless you sleep with me in the shower. You are shady as James." The next one, guys, is another controversial one. Don't lynch me again, don't burn the place down, but it is Diamonds Are Forever. Now, Diamonds Are Forever is the one that everyone hates from Sean Connery. He had left the role after You Only Live Twice. George Lazenby came in for one film, and then Sean Connery came back again. And it was campy, it was over the top, it was crazy plot. It was Sean Connery looked a bit more bored in the role, which he does, I must say. But for me, I prefer this to You Only Live Twice. I don't know, I prefer it to Never Say Never Again. I just feel like the action and the set pieces and the storyline, it did have me invested, and I like the colourful nature of this. I like setting it in Vegas. I like the vibe of the picture. Sean Connery does look a little bit bored, but he delivers when he needs to, and he's having fun in a few moments. I agree, it's not his best performance as James Bond, but he's decent in the film, and for me the film has this interesting kind of storyline to it. This diamond smuggling storyline, which is interesting to take James Bond and put him out of his comfort zone into this kind of diamond smuggling world, which is not a James Bond plot I would very much expect. It has one of the best Bond girls in my opinion, Tiffany Case, because she's a riot. She's very, very spunky, she's very, very funny, she's got a lot of charisma. Jill St. John is a wonderful actress in the film, and she completely steals every scene she's in and shares the screen very well with Sean Connery and becomes an equal to James Bond, which you always want. I mean, you talk about Diamonds Are Forever being this campy mess, people say, but Tiffany Case was one of the first James Bond girls who actually stood up to Sean Connery. Sean Connery was known to just use his girls in the background and just in damsel in distress. Tiffany Case, even though she's a little bit, silly and campy and all of that sort of stuff, she still stands tall and stands up to James Bond. She feels like an actual presence in the movie. I feel like people forget that about Diamonds Are Forever. The fact that Tiffany Case is actually somewhat of a strong woman in the film, which is unusual for a Sean Connery Bond film. This film has some bizarre henchmen in it who are two gay gentlemen, which is very, very strange for the 70s. they're just kind of gay killers, and they go around killing loads of people who, you know, get involved with the diamonds. They're weird, they're creepy, and people don't like them. I actually like this. I think James Bond needs to be remembered for characters like this, bizarre, weird henchmen. And they are, you know, they're a gay couple, which is nothing wrong with that, you know. I don't know why people had a problem with them being a gay couple. It was just the fact that they're both bizarre, they're both odd, they both finish each other's sentences. So I think it adds that kind of strange undertone to it. They're kind of a gay couple, which there's nothing wrong with, but they're a strange gay couple, and they're an evil gay couple. I thought it was an interesting idea, because these two guys are complete fruitcakes. Sean Connery also gets his ass kicked by an ass-kicking duo called Bambi and Thumper, two women. I genuinely think Diamonds Are Forever is the best depiction of women in the Sean Connery James Bond films so far. They kick Bond's ass, you know, these two martial art villains who are ladies, and they're very memorable characters in Bond canon. And Diamonds Are Forever has memorable moments in Bond canon. You know, everyone remembers those two henchmen, everyone remembers Bambi and Thumper, everyone remembers the casino setting, the moon buggy in this film, and Tiffany Case, everyone remembers, you know, so it's a memorable film even though people seem to look down on it. For me, this just had more fun than You Only Live Twice. It kind of came across as a 70s crime caper mixed with James Bond, and I like that. I don't know what it is, guys, I just really like Diamonds Are Forever. I think it's a really entertaining film. I've heard people call it boring, which is weird because that's the reaction I had to You Only Live Twice. Next up on the list is From Russia with Love, which is a very gritty, very realistic spy thriller with one of the best performances by Sean Connery as James Bond. This is really low key, guys, this is really low key. You don't have the extravagant action scenes, you don't have lots of James Bond elements to it. It's just a spy thriller, basically. Just a spy thriller, but a very, very good one. I feel like Sean Connery's Bond always kind of is emotionally withdrawn from the women in the movies, which kind of goes on to become less and less as the Bond films go on. You see him getting more affectionate toward women and not just seeing them as, you know, cheap, you know, flings, I guess. In this one, you kind of believe the relationship between James Bond and the Bond girl in the movie, who's a Russian agent. There's some genuine affection there. It's an interesting relationship because she kind of betrays him, and he kind of he likes her, and it almost as if he loves her, but he has to manipulate her and things like that, which James Bond usually has to do. But you do generally feel like there is something there between these two, which is rare with Sean Connery. From Russia with Love also has a fantastic final fight scene on a train with James Bond and another agent, which is just very, very low key, very, very well shot, very claustrophobic. It's a wonderful little scene, and you know, it's nothing compared to what went on in the Bond series with these gigantic set pieces at the end. This was just a down and dirty fight. So everything about this is down and dirty, it's low key. It was only the second James Bond film, but it was already a step down into more low key territory from Dr. No, which is the first Bond film, which has a lot of the Bond elements we associate. From Russia with Love didn't, kind of strip things back a bit already in only the second film, but I like it, you know, it's a good film. Sean Connery is very, very charismatic. Sean Connery sees it through when there are some slow moments. Probably one of the best James Bond films overall, definitely one of the best Sean Connery ones. Next up, guys, we're getting close to the top of the list, is Dr. No. Dr. No, guys, I absolutely love it. This film is the shit. Because Sean Connery literally walks into the role, he's James Bond. He doesn't have to grow into it. You know, the other actors do. I feel like Roger Moore had to grow into it. Timothy Dalton, he had to sort of grow into his take. He only done 2 films, but the second film, he seems like a full-rounded performance. I'd say Pierce Brosnan gets it straight away. George Lazenby needed to grow into it, even though I like his performance. So, you know, all these actors had to grow into it, but Sean Connery, straight away, just names Bond, James Bond. Alright then, I'm in. This is James Bond. It has a lot of the elements we would later see in James Bond. It has the over-the-top villain Lair, it has the over-the-top villain. Dr. No, I think, is very, very creepy. It has the classic, beautiful Bond girl, who is a little bit of a damsel in distress, but Honey Rider is actually kind of a unique Bond girl. She has a little bit of a unique backstory that she tells James at certain moments, so there's something to Honey Rider. and she's one of the very most beautiful Bond girls, played by Ursula Andress. Mixes darkness with campy and over the top, and that's what I feel like the best James Bond films do, and it was only the first. To already be nailing it that much. The fact that they pulled off a spy thriller masterpiece pretty much with the first film shows how great James Bond was, shows how great Sean Connery was, shows how good the material was, and it's just a film that is very memorable and very you get very engaged watching it, and it never goes too far over its station into full camp. It's low key and it's over top in moments, but it never goes fully over the top, it never jumps the shark. So, Dr. No is a great example of James Bond done brilliantly. Number 1 on the list is, of course, how could it be anything else? It's Goldfinger, guys. Goldfinger is just fantastic, it really is. The level of entertainment in this film from start to finish is uncanny. I think it's one of the most entertaining films ever made. You literally sit there and you're invested, because it's Sean Connery giving probably his best performance as James Bond. The confidence, the swagger, the charisma in the role that he's now developed is uncanny. I would probably say this is the best performance of James Bond in a movie. It has to be, because everything comes together, and you get the James Bond Aston Martin, you get the gadgets, you get the tyrannical villain, you get the Bond girls who are memorable, with memorable names and memorable looks.
Who are you?
My name is Pussy Galore.
I must be dreaming.
It has the iconic villain henchman in Oddjob, who is one of the most memorable James Bond villain henchmen. Look at this arsehole. Look at the state of him. He is creepy as hell, and he throws a hat. He kills you with a hat. The guy is gangster. And there's memorable moments, of course. The one that everyone knows is indeed this one.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Gert Frobe is an amazing villain who goes back and forth with Sean Connery very, very well. One of the greatest things about this film is that everyone in it comes across as a movie star. Honor Blackman, Sean Connery, Gert Frobe, they're all movie stars. They're all magnetic on the screen. And everything about Goldfinger is just magnetic. It keeps you absorbed from start to finish. It has all those James Bond elements that we're still talking about today. And I think it's just one of the greatest depictions of James Bond possibly ever. I don't know if it's my favourite James Bond film overall, but it's definitely my favourite Sean Connery James Bond film.
Positively shocking.
So there you have it, guys. There's my ranking of the Sean Connery James Bond films. What's your ranking? Don't lynch me, don't hate me. I know this is a controversial list and people are going to say Diamonds Are Forever is by far the worst. It's Never Say Never Again, it's way better. You Only Live Twice is way better. And I fully accept that. I understand why people like those films. People just gel with them. I just don't seem to gel with them. But yeah, let me know your list in the comments down below. Let me know if you think Sean Connery is the greatest James Bond. And stay tuned, because I'm going to be ranking over time the other James Bond actor movies. And of course the next one's actually going to be George Lazenby, who only done one movie, so I'm just going to talk about his movie. So yeah, stay tuned for that. So thanks for watching again, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. I talk about retro movies and superhero movies and movies such as James Bond as well. So if you enjoyed this, please comment down below, please subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next video.